I was watching the PvP tournament at Gamescom when I had a shocking realization. What if most people are playing WoW Arena completely wrong without even knowing it? And if you're wondering who's talking, sup guys, it's Big Moran. Today I'll be filling in for Dan, who is off doing something in League of Legends. Anyway, I wanted to make a video about playstyles in WoW Arena and how they're really important. Remember the very first time you had to choose your starting Pokemon? My theory is that in WoW, players are subconsciously picking a playstyle in PvP, maybe without even knowing it. Instead of Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, we're all choosing different strategies to use in every single game. But there's one big problem. Balance. Because unlike Pokemon where each type can counter each other, there is one strategy or playstyle in PvP that is secretly better than the rest, and I don't think many players understand how it works. Today I'll teach you about these three main strategies in PvP, explaining how one is good for beginners, another is good for intermediate players, and how one strategy reigns supreme. And don't worry, no matter what category you fall into, I'll give you some tips on how you can become a better player, showing you how to level up in-game. So our journey is going to start with what I think is the most effective strategy to master for most players, and if you're the type of person who likes to multi-class as a DPS, this could be the fastest way to farm those elite sets every season. The strategy is simple, to play as aggressive as you possibly can. And the reason why aggression works is pretty obvious. By playing fast enough, you'll overwhelm the enemy team. If you've ever watched Peekaboo as either a fan or a hater, you've seen this firsthand as he consistently manages to 1v2 teams in every single expansion. In the past, we've called this a brain-dead strategy, and while being hyper-aggressive might seem simple at first, there are a ton of traps that a lot of people fall into when they're trying to actually replicate this in Arena for themselves, and this can result in them looking like a complete noob. So what is Peekaboo doing differently? Well, it starts with the fundamentals, maximizing damage while being aggressive with your CC, and this is truly the part that matters. After all, damage plus CC is how you win games in Arena, right? It's the combination that never fails because of its raw efficiency. Think of it like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, or Sea-Doo and losing to Europeans in the AWC. Some things just go together. So at the most basic level, always combine your burst with lockdown, no exceptions. But to really fine-tune your aggression, there are some additional steps worth taking. First up, stop thinking about your defensive cooldowns as strictly being defensive. I know this might sound crazy, but you should use your increased bulk as a sort of shield to stay in the fight. Oftentimes players will find themselves panic pressing defensives and then running away, when in reality, using your defensives is one of the best ways to generate counter pressure. Next up, get in the habit of checking enemy defensives. If someone doesn't have defensives, and if the enemy healer doesn't have their trinket, that opens up a possible win condition as long as you have the combination of damage and CC ready. And even if someone does have their defensives, which is always the case in the opener, you should always try to carry momentum by swapping on CDs. I know you're probably sick of us telling you to swap on defensives, but the amount of players I've personally seen just tunnel one target from start to finish in solo shuffle is honestly quite shocking. Remember, the golden rule of picking a target in solo shuffle is that there is never just one target. Next up, and this one is a bit more advanced but super useful for all of you healers, keep track of your team's defensives on Omni CD. This step is criminally overlooked, but if you see that your teammates have all of their defensives, it's usually a good sign that you are safe to play aggressive. Of course, what you want to avoid is being hyper aggressive when no one on your team has defensive CDs and the enemy team has a go ready. So sometimes you just need to wait it out. And finally, it goes without saying that doing more damage or healing will carry aggression too. Every single season, the data is abundantly clear. Doing more damage or healing is directly correlated with rating gains. And speaking of which, if you want to improve your offensive play and see noticeable rating gains, we've already set up the skill capped UI with everything you need to maximize both damage and healing. Our members' exclusive profiles automatically clean up your nameplates, keeping all of your most important debuffs front and center, making CC more visible and removing all the pointless clutter. We've even split up Omnibar for you, isolating key defensive cooldowns in a dedicated area of your screen, giving you the same decision-making potential as a rank 1 player. And to make sure you hit your rating goals in Season 3, we're rolling out brand new updates for every single spec, teaching you step-by-step how to get the perfect rotation in Arena, including secret tips and tricks that you won't find anywhere else. There's never been a better time to sign up because we continue to offer a rank up guarantee across all of our games. So if you're interested in signing up for Skill Cap and you want to help me out, just use the discount link below. For now, let's get back to the video. At this point, you might be wondering, if playing aggressive is so good, why doesn't it always work? Because even in other games, it seems like there's a limit to how aggressive you can play, so what's going on? For one, hyper-aggression suffers insane diminishing returns as you climb the ladder. Better players are used to dealing with lots of pressure, so as you climb higher and higher, the effectiveness of raw aggression just goes down. To make things worse, if you try and play overly aggressive against better players, there's a higher chance you will be punished for things like wasting your trinket or burning a defensive to push in. And to be clear, I'm not saying that playing aggressive can't work at high ratings. I mean, just look at Peekaboo. He's made an aggro playstyle work for over 10 years, and as a more extreme recent example, look at a player like Calvish who plays sub-rogue like it's a Fury Warrior. Aggression can also be tricky depending on the class you play, and there's a few specs in WoW which are better suited for a non-interactive playstyle. A great example is Elemental Shaman. This is a spec which is notoriously passive since you don't really have the tools to win games by yourself. Instead, your toolkit is best used to slow down the enemy team. And speaking of which, this is the perfect time to introduce our second strategy, which I don't really have a good name for, but for clarity, I'm going to call it playing hyper-defensive. Now, I know that playing defensive isn't the most glamorous strategy, but I think it's a very important step for some intermediate level players, and in some ways it's just as brain dead as playing hyper aggressive. To be a good defensive player, you need to be as annoying as possible, and instead of actively trying to play the game and speed things up, you instead focus on reactively playing the game, which involves slowing things down. This ranges from how you use your defensives, your utility, and most importantly, your CC and your interrupts. Here's a really good example. Many Shadow Priests might think that their Stun Silence combo and their AoE fear should always be used on enemy healers because that's how you play to win. But what can also work is playing to not lose and instead using your Stun Silence combo on enemy players maybe during their cooldown windows to slow the game down, or simply using Psychic Scream as a peel for yourself in order to free cast. And going back to Elemental Shaman for a second, this is a spec which is just tailor fit for defensive play. While you could use your Wind Shear offensively on the enemy healer all game, you could also just focus on slowing the game down by interrupting damage or CC, and since your win condition is basically just dampening, you really want to be slowing the game down because you're going to win eventually when the enemy healer goes out of mana or can't deal with your damage. And if you take the same approach with your entire utility kit, you can become sort of a goalie for your healer, trying to block any offensive plays. This strategy even works on classes you might not expect. One weird trend I've noticed is that some hunters in high-rated lobbies will scatter and sometimes even trap enemy DPS with Diamond Knights of all things, which is something that low-rated hunters do too, while everyone else believes that the correct play is just to trap or to scatter the enemy healer on cooldown. And even though playing defensive doesn't seem very cool at first, there's definitely a lot of outplay potential, and a common outplay you'll see at high ratings is Demon Hunters using their defensive CDs preemptively, and this includes everything from Blur to Netherwalk to Glimpse, with the sole purpose of immuning a CC or shutting down a kill attempt. The advantage of playing hyper defensive, and the reason why I think it's equally as brain dead, is because it's very robotic. By only reacting to what the enemy team is doing and playing only to annoy the enemy DPS, you're pretty much on autopilot. Your focus isn't on carving out some complicated win condition by paying attention to defensives, but instead just winning the game passively and just constantly blocking. And just like hyper-offensive play, this strategy even works at the highest ratings, with players like Swapsy having a reputation for being a brick wall in Arena. And as someone with the world record for rank 1 titles, I think Swapsy is probably doing something right. If you want to become a better defensive player, there are a few key steps you need to take in Arena which can work on any class. The first step is to pay more attention to Omni CD, and once again, this isn't just for you healers out there. As a DPS, knowing what defensives your teammates have available allows you to make better defensive decisions. If everyone's out of defensive CDs, you'll need to explore ways to shut down a kill, which might involve using your CC defensively or being fast with your utility. And speaking of crowd control, you should try and pay closer attention to important CC cooldowns on the enemy team. Just as an example here, you should monitor the cooldown of Freezing Trap, even as a DPS, because if you see that it's coming off cooldown, you can be ready to play defensive when your healer gets CC'd. Now we have to answer the same question we asked before. When does defensive play simply not work? Just like hyper-aggression suffers some diminishing returns, so does turtling all day.
Please kill him!
At a high level, defensive play is very predictable. If your opponent knows that you're always going to react in a certain way to CC or cooldowns, you can easily get baited into wasting a defensive when it's not needed. For instance, if Waz knows the enemy team will try and pre-use defensives, he can simply swap to someone else, baiting the enemy team to waste their cooldowns. On top of this, hyper-defensive play can also be really bad and deep dampening. It's good to try to avoid damage while healing reduction is high, but most players don't realize that dampening puts the game on a strict timer. Sometimes you just have to push in and try to win the game, and if you're constantly running away instead of carving out a win condition, you might be passively losing. Alright, so now that we know there are two radically different strategies that can work in Arena. But at the start of this video, I mentioned that only one is the best, so which is it? Is it trying to play like Peekaboo, which means going ballistic with your damage and CC all game, or is it trying to play like Swapsy, cool as a cucumber, simply pressing your block button whenever the enemy team attacks? Well, just like other things in life, I think the best strategy in PvP requires some balance of both extremes. And after nearly 2 decades of playing this game, I think that playing neutral is the absolute best strategy. If you can play like Peekaboo and Swapsy at the same time, you're obviously doing something right. And just from personal experience, the type of players to reach the high end of the solo shuffle ladder adopt both a hyper-aggressive and hyper-defensive strategy at the same time. They're really good at snowballing pressure, and they're also very annoying. If there's one player I think who plays neutral better than anyone else, it's Chanimal. And he's someone I would actually consider to be one of the top 5 PvPers of all time. Maybe someday I'll make a list of my top 5, just let me know if that's something you'd like to see on this channel. Anyway, Chanimal is a master of game states, which seems like a complicated concept to grasp at first, but is actually pretty straightforward. Arena games fluctuate between high and low points of pressure, and these are the game states. The goal is to always either reset back to neutral, or even better, try to reverse momentum to be in your favor. And I want to show this clip of Chanimal to demonstrate what it means to control a game state. So notice how his cooldown window is about to be over, and he's kind of under pressure right now, and he can't really afford to play hyper aggressive. In other words, he needs to find a way to try to keep momentum in this particular position. And he's going to control momentum in a very clever way. What he's going to do is manipulate the positioning of the enemy warrior, drawing them out of line of sight, which puts the warrior now under pressure since they're LOSing their healer. And so even though Chanimal was just under pressure, all he needed to do was make a simple positioning adjustment, and suddenly now he's in control once again. And this is what it means to be a master of game states, and even though he was just under pressure, his positioning was able to serve both an offensive and defensive purpose to reset the game back to neutral. So just to pull everything together, even though playing hyper offensive or hyper defensive can work at the highest level, I think the overall best playstyle and the one that consistently wins tournaments is playing neutral. So if you can manage to pull from both extremes, I think you're probably going to be doing something right. And as you might have noticed, I get pretty nerdy when it comes to PvP, and I love sharing all the knowledge I've learned over the past 2 decades. That's why it's always been my personal goal at SkillCap to truly help players improve. For instance, I know a lot of people struggle with the spec I personally main, which is why I designed the Resto Druid course to be highly approachable for any player and even useful for people who are already experienced with the spec. And we apply this mindset to every course we make on our website, which is why even after 10 years, SkillCap is still helping thousands of players every season. And honestly, there's never been a better time to join since we have so many amazing benefits, including the SkillCap UI, which I personally use especially to help me gear my alts with the brand new Bissless feature. We're so confident that we can help you hit your rating goals that we even offer a rating gain guarantee. If you're interested in signing up, we have a special discount link below. For now though, I want to thank you all for watching. See you soon.